Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today we continue our tribute to the legendary Timothy Green Beckley. And I have folk who adventured with Tim and helped him put his books together, and we'll be hearing their memories, their impressions, their thoughts, and their testament as to what Tim meant to them in their lives. And we will start with somebody who knew him phenomenally well, another Tim Swartz, the legendary and one and only as well.
Well, hi, Hercules. Thank you
Hello.
very much for this invitation to Mount Olympus. I'm very happy to be with you tonight and to be able to talk about Tim Beckley.
That is incredibly awesome. How did you meet Tim Beckley, or how did you become aware of Tim Beckley?
Right. Well, I actually, let me think now, one of the first books that I ever bought from Gray Barker of his Saucerian Press when I was um, just a kid, weird kid, I guess, if I was buying books from Saucerian Press. Actually, let's see, I had found out about Gray Barker because John Keel, one of his books, I think it was Strange Creatures from Time and Space, had in the back a list of various publications that you could write into to subscribe to it, and Saucerian Press was one of them. So I started getting a lot of material from Barker. One of them was Tim Beckley's first book, something that I think it was like it was called like Richard Shaver and the Mysteries of the Underground Kingdom, something along those lines. I guess that was the first book that Beckley ever wrote when he was about 15 years old. And it wasn't, until years later that I actually paid attention to who wrote the book that I realized it was Beckley's book. So that was really my first exposure to Tim Beckley's work. But I got to know him, it was probably around 1983. I was working at a station in Dayton, Ohio. And at the time, J. Allen Hynek had come to the Wright-Patterson Air and Space Museum to give a talk. It was an anniversary of Project Blue Book. I don't remember which anniversary it was. So I managed to get the assignment editor to let me interview Hynek. And after I was finished, I made a little piece that I then put up on the CBS newsfeed. Station I was working for was a CBS affiliate. And they had a satellite feed that affiliate stations across the country could put stories up on, and then anybody from across the nation could then pull it down and use it on their news broadcast. And I guess that this story was pulled down by a station in New York. Because shortly afterwards, Tim Beckley contacted me. He wanted a copy of this interview. So at the time, I made him. It would have been a VHS copy because we were shooting at the time in 3/4 inch, and VHS and Beta were really the only other formats available
Mm-hmm.
for home use. So I sent him this interview, and we just remained occasionally communicating by letter, and the occasional phone call, but really nothing more came of that till around it was gosh, 5 or 6 years later. At that time I was living in Indianapolis, and Tim was just getting ready to start his new magazine called UFO Universe, and he sent me a letter and wanted to know if I wanted to write some articles for it. He was looking for writers for this magazine, and at the time he was hoping that maybe he could have some spin-off magazines as well, which he eventually did. And that's really how it started for us. I wrote him some pieces for UFO Universe, and then it just blossomed from there because Tim also liked to do these spin-off magazines. Some of them would have been um, like gosh, what was it? One of them was like something UFO sightings. I can't remember, mysterious UFO sightings, something along those lines. That one was like a bi-monthly. And then others were just one-shot magazines like Angels and Aliens and, various titles like that. And, the more that he wanted article wise, the more I was willing to write for him. At that point, the station that I was working at had gotten several word processors. And you have to remember, I mean, the internet, it was there, but it hadn't taken off yet. It was mostly bulletin boards
Hmm.
on places like Prodigy and CompuServe. So even though the station did have computers, they and I can't remember the name. They were like I, I can't remember the name, but basically the station had its own memory bank that all the computers then in the offices were connected to this memory bank. Well, with this, they got a word processor, and because I hated typewriters, even electric typewriters, which I mean I was a fast typist, but I hated making corrections afterwards. And word processing, just the most beautiful invention in the world. And so I was able to hammer out articles for Tim Beckley just really fast. And then it went to his books. He decided that he wanted to start up his book publishing again. He had kind of let the books kind of go foul a little bit, as he was concentrating more on his magazines. And with the success of his magazines, he wanted to try book publishing again. So he asked me if I wanted to write some books for him. And one of the first assignments I got from him was to rescue uh, 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 the author who went by the pseudonym Commander X, who had
I
a
remember
contract.
Commander X.
Yep. Well, Commander X had been writing for Beckley a few years before I even got involved with him and had a contract with Beckley to do a book about time travel and invisibility. Unfortunately, he had some kind of health issue, some kind of heart related health issue, and wasn't able to complete his assignment or finish his contract. So Beckley asked me if I'd be willing to take these on for him because he was kind of running up against a time limit, and I said, "Well, send me what he's got." What he's collected so far, and I'll see what I could do. So Beckley sent me all this material. He and it was just really just a bunch of haphazard notes and stuff, and then I was supposed to try to put it all together and make some kind of sense out of it. But the time travel book, Commander X was concentrating more on the magical aspect of it,
Hmm.
how you could use like magic spells and things like that to travel through time, and then some like historical accounts of people who had like say magic time mirrors and rings, and a lot of mythology, which is really interesting. But I wanted to bring it a little bit more into what was going on now, and that's where I discovered the whole thing about time slips. That early on, so I had to incorporate, naturally time slips into the first time travel book. And so Beckley liked what I produced for him. I think he was just happy to have something at that point to publish. I mean, it was, I have to admit,
Eh,
it was pretty rough, my material. And fortunately, we both improved greatly as we continued on with our relationship in publishing to the point where I really do think that Tim Beckley's books with his Global Communications and Inner Light Publications were just really superior books. And then he brought in a lot of other people like yourself, to contribute to these books. So that in kind of a long-winded fashion, that was how I got together with Tim, and I tell you something, it was fun every step of the way. I mean, yeah, Tim could be annoying a lot of times because he had this very manic type of personality
Hmm.
that if he got if he got as the old saying would go, a bee up his bonnet,
It's very
it would
polite.
yeah. It would be something that he would want done now. And if you were working on something else, and I'm the type of person, I want to get what I'm working on now finished before I start on something else. But Beckley, he was the type that, no, stop working on all of this. We got to do this. And that would annoy me a little bit. But, other than things like that, we really did have a great working relationship. And like I said, we both learned a lot about the publishing business. Especially when it came to the time when we could start the publishing on demand. Because before that, Beckley worked with these various printing companies that would print out, like a huge number of books, and then Tim would have to have them stored someplace, and he had a small apartment in Manhattan, so I mean he couldn't he'd keep some of them stored there, so his assistant Carole could mail them out when the orders came in. But he had to maintain a number of different storage facilities, around the area to keep these books stored. Sometimes with disastrous consequences. Unfortunately, he had one place that it really was nothing more than an old railroad boxcar. I guess there were this company had a lot full of them that people would rent them out for storage, and he kept a lot of books in one of these containers that got flooded one time, and he lost a lot of books. Yeah, he lost a lot of books. Some of them were ones that had never really sold, and then others were ones that were selling, and then he just would have to eat those costs. So when the whole print on demand thing started, I mean, that really was a godsend. And then, he was able to really just to become even more successful, because he didn't have to pay up front, this huge number of books that may or may not ever sell. But I guess that's a problem with all publishers, really.
And we're gonna leave the story there for now, so we can see how other people met up with Tim Beckley. But I definitely want to come back. You've opened up so many different doors of inquiry. I can't resist going down them again. The one and only Olav Phillips, somebody who is like the layers of an onion and who becomes more interesting with each layer of the onion you get to know. Greetings, Olav. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Great. How did you meet Tim?
So, like many people, I originally unknowingly bought a whole bunch of book sales, and I'm a bit of a bibliophile. And I would go to a UFO convention or paranormal event or whatever, and I'd see used books or new books, and Secret Lectures of Commander X and a lot of these books from the 80s and the 90s. I would buy them, and I never really UFO universe. I would see it in the newsstand when I was in college, I think, at the time. And I was like, hey, this looks interesting. So I buy it. I never actually connected who the publisher was. Um, then one day, I was writing for Paranoia magazine at the time, which at the time was owned by my friend Ron Patton. And Ron came to me and said, hey, there's this guy I know, Tim, he's looking for writers, you know, what do you think? And I said, well, I've written these articles for Paranoia about secret Nazi bases on the moon and all kinds of crazy stuff, which was later ripped off by the Weekly World News, by the way. It's on the Crack magazine website in the Weekly World News. And the Weekly World News claims that it was written by one of their staff writers. I guess I'm a staff writer at the Weekly World News. But
See something else we discover about you, Olav.
yeah. But anyway, so I talked to Tim, and Tim's like, hey, I'm looking for writers to write about this and that. And I don't think there was a clear book at the time. I think it was one of his, what he would do occasionally, which is go out and solicit, writing. And sometimes you get an assignment, like with the secret weapons, or was it the Ark of the Covenant and other ancient weapons or something like that. And he'd come and he'd email you, go, hey, I'm writing this book. You want to put something in it? And I'd be like, sure. Here you go. But yeah, it was through Ron, and he knew Ron very well, and he had approached Ron and said, hey, you know anybody who can write? My stuff on Paranoia tended to be fairly popular. So Ron hooked me up with him. And then later, I decided that selfishly decided that the royalties that you got from publishers were not that high. And so with the advent of print on demand, which is what Tim was talking about, I decided what the hell, I'm going to print my own stuff. And I had secured the publishing rights from another person I know to publish some of their stuff. And I was starting to build it up and kind of try to understand publishing, because I'm an engineer. I'm not a publisher. I write for fun, but this isn't my profession. And so at that point, I'd written for a number of Tim's books. We would chat all the time about mysterious weirdness. I owned Paranoia by then, so I was asking him occasionally, hey, you got any articles in the pile that you're not using that I could just kind of put in there? We would trade. But I asked him, I said, how do you do this? And how do you do this? Because you're the most successful paranormal, metaphysical UFO publisher I've ever seen that isn't one of the main ones. There's a couple super, super big ones that are owned by multinational corporations. The only other guy I ever saw that had any success at it all was Beckley. And Beckley kind of took some time out of his schedule and said, okay, I'm going to explain this to you. And he would help me out and answer my questions. He would think of something and send me an email or call me and say, hey, did you think about that? But I have to give him 100% credit. At this point, I would say that for a paranormal, metaphysical kind of independent publisher, I would say that I'm doing pretty darn good, comparatively speaking. How much I make on a monthly basis in profit, I would say I'm doing all right. I'd like it to be much higher, but I'm satisfied. But I have only achieved that because of advice that Beckley gave me. Beckley told me, look, this is the secret. And I'm not going to share it. Tim knows it. I can see him nodding his head. There's a secret. There's a way you do this. Tim shared that with me in confidence, and I am forever grateful to that man for taking me under his wing and helping me out, helping me figure it out. But I followed his advice to the letter, and it paid off. And he was amazing, an amazing writer, amazing researcher, a good friend. I could call him anytime and just chit chat. We did a lot of email, and it's always very pleasant. I went on the show with Tim, and it was always a wonderful show to do. And he was so knowledgeable, and he'd give me advice and see how I was doing, and I would do the same for him. I would give him a lot of articles from old issues of Paranoia to beef up, some of the things that he was working on. We had some projects that never came to fruition, but they would have been awesome because he was involved. But everything that I've succeeded in doing in publishing is, I think, due to Tim and his advice and him taking the time to help a poor guy out who just wanted to print books, and he was very generous with that. So I'm eternally grateful to him.
Thank you, Olav Phillips. That was excellent. And it's like looking at the facet of two different facets of the same gem and getting a bigger picture. So thank you so very much. Marc and Phyllis Brinkerhoff, who have a unique relationship with the universe and the people who created it and run it. How are you?
We're fine, thanks.
We're good.
I like Tim. I like your T-shirt. That's really cool. We met Tim. Well, I met Tim in 1975 at a conference in New York City, and then I moved back upstate New York, where my parents were, and I mean, it was up there since 1973. Came to New York to meet with the people at this conference. It was great, and I met some. Besides Betty Hill was there, who I'd met before, but I met Betty Hill again, and that's where I met Harold Salkin, Tim's friend and partner at the time. As far as I know, Harold was the main person, according to Harold, who brought George Adamski to New York City for an interview, and he was saying to me about my experiences, because I raised my hand when they said, "Has anybody had any experiences with aliens?" Meaning actual contact. And so when I raised my hand in this audience, I was the only one there. So Harold came over to me after the show was done. It was a conference on a stage, and then asked me questions and took my number. So I went back home. Then I came back down again another time for some different meetings that he was having around East 50-something Street, like East 53rd, around Madison or somewhere. He would have these brownstones or so, or rent some kind of rooms in there. There's a couple floors. And that's when he asked me some questions about photography, because I had taken some photos. Tim.
Oh, because they thought you meant Harold.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tim and Harold. Well, Harold was there too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
So I had taken a few photos around 1977. Made friends with Stella Lansing, who I met at that conference, and I knew she was getting actual real photos, but they were not actual pictures she could see. She would take a photo and it would appear on her film. And so I took my camera to the fields and I said, "You guys must know Stella because we're friends now." And they said, "Yeah, you could do these things." So I said, "Okay." So I started aiming my camera where they told me to aim it, and took the picture. And I heard now my crew, my gang. Sure enough, on the film would come pictures, and Tim was fascinated by these pictures. So he wanted to come visit, and he would visit me up at my house upstate, and we'd go to the fields, and I'd call him in with my telepathy and words I say, that's just some of the words. And ships would come along and flash on and off and do their thing. And I'd take photos, and we had later on, 1978, Phyllis had a movie camera she had a friend give her, right? One of our friends had a Super 8 movie camera, and I held it and took pictures across the field's tree tops. And we got the film back. There was a pinkish orange orb, more than an orb, ship going by over the tops of the trees and flashing off. So it could have been about 20-foot diameter if we were over the trees where it was. So these things were happening. So Tim did come up a couple times to the field with Carole Rodriguez.
Didn't he also do a UFO conference that you had to talk with?
Oh yeah, at the Christ Church of New York City, 1980 or so, or 79 or 80. He did a show here at Christ Church in around 60th Street, Park Avenue, somewhere around there. It was great, that show. He said the church people there, we were downstairs, it was at the stage and everything. He said this was the most people ever in the church. It was standing room only all over the place. So he had some great conferences he would put on. And one of my friends who's passed on, and Tim's friend, Bryce Bond, Bryce passed away in 1992. Bryce would open some shows for him, besides do speaking engagements there with him. So Bryce introduced me a lot of times, and Bryce went to the fields with me, and we had experiences together. And one of the pictures I'm going to show is an illustration I made for Bryce.
It was in the book. Show him the book.
I'm sorry.
This is Tim and
the
Tim and Tim's
UFO
book.
repeaters. And this is one of my photos here, showing a person at the window of at a spaceship, silhouetted. This is, I know it's the picture in the magazine book, but this is Bryce in the middle there. And the alien on that he's speaking to with the bald head is an alien I actually know. So, and we'd seen on the ships, and I've had other friends who are on this passed on now, but had actually met the same being. Then I took them on the ship. So this is out of body in that experience. But Bryce met that being when he was visiting England, 1976 or so, or 77, and he was taken on the ship during a crop circle forming around him, and he was missing, and the people with him were looking for him. And when he came back, he was standing in the middle of a crop circle. As he saw it, the wheats went around him, and he looked down at his feet, and he realized his feet were transforming from this grasses into the bottom of a flooring on the ship. And that's when he saw the people there. So when his friends found him, I think it was about a couple hours later, and he was just standing there, and they're calling, Bryce, Bryce, where are you? And he's yes, I'm here. And he said, we're just looking here, you're not here. But for me, when Tim came up to the fields with me, with other people besides Carole Ann, they witnessed things. So I know he might not totally understand at the time where I came from and what I was speaking about, how I'm a walk-in, and I've got proof from my parents and everybody, because I was the only one who knew what they were doing before I was born. And so they were going, how would you know that? Because I was following you around, things like that. But he witnessed so many UFOs on the fields that I think that's why he wanted to use me sometimes in the books. And he was the one who told the people from Steven Spielberg's movies, when they were calling from California, if you notice any contactees or people that have had experiences with aliens at a young age with benevolent aliens. And he said, I only know one guy is upstate New York. And they said to him, would that guy meet us in New York City if we come to town? And he said, call him. So they called, and I said, sure, I'll come to town for you, sure. So about an hour in, and met with them. And they talked about everything they could think of, trying to get me to speak. I had photographs, I had artwork. And they said that Spielberg would use some of the information. So I figured I would need to have something written. Like they're taking my information, they tape recorded me, they wrote down everything, and they said, oh no, we're just using this for ideas. When E.T. the Extraterrestrial came out, most of all my ideas were there, including phone home, because they asked me, well, what do you call the ship you go to? I said, I call it home. So they stole that. They stole a lot of stuff, including the energy for healing and the heart telepathy, everything. And I told them they know where I am and I know where they are. And so Elliot and E.T. had the same connection in that way.
That's how they phoned home.
They phoned home. So there is a part in the movie where E.T. comes out of that body bag when they opened it up, and he says, E.T. phone home, home. That's when he had to go out of body to the ship. Otherwise, he never phoned home because the things in the trees didn't work exactly right. So I knew that was what they were doing. So that's some of the stuff that happened. So that was in 1978 when I met Phyllis
Also,
with Tim.
that's true. That was the day that we met. But also, he was responsible for Mazzola
Yep.
sending the investigators.
All right, he helped us with investigators who asked him from New York City about anybody does he know anybody who has a photograph of a UFO with a negative?
A photograph.
One photograph. He says, yeah, no kind of state at the time, but
No,
now
no,
I'm down. I was here.
No, you were living.
All right, I'm sorry, guys. I was here already in New York. I'm thinking of the other guys. So he says Marc's in New York. So they're in New York, and they were police
Association
Yeah,
of
they were-
some sort.
police.
Scientific Bureau of Investigation.
Scientific Bureau of Investigation was their name. And Pete Mazzola ran it. Pete passed on in 1980s, late 80s. But they documented my photographs. But when they came here knocking on our door,
I think Harold was with him.
and Harold,
Harold Salt.
yes, Harold Salka was with him. You're right.
Because that's a publicity guy.
Yes,
for
yes, so
Tim.
he came and he says, we heard you have a photograph. And I went, well, I got more than one. I pulled out a big manila envelope, a really big one, filled with Super 8 movies, films and negatives from the 70s and everything. And they were like floored. So Pete analyzed my photography and also the cameras. He took the cameras, not that time, but next time he visited.
Took all the originals, took all the cameras,
Took the
and they were
negatives.
gone for how long?
Almost 2 to 3 weeks. And they were gone for a while, so I didn't have anything to work with. But he promised everything was coming back, and it all came back fine.
Well,
That's
now,
good.
there were thumbprints on some of the really good ones, but
Oh,
that's
well,
okay.
we can clear it. But yeah, it was good.
But
No
that was
light
all-
leaks or anything
that
that's
was all-
examined.
That was all due to Tim.
Tim with Project Visit from Texas and all these other people that were famous for ground saucer watch, studied the pictures and the negatives and everything. And Coleman Bonkovitsky, who had 25 years of Kodak analysis and 25 years in military photography, he looked at them and he said, Marc, they've changed your negative. This is a 126 little negative from a Kodak Instamatic snapshot camera. How did they get the distance with the stars in the background and the flange of a spaceship is shooting a probe out of it? And I asked for that in the picture. I said, can you shoot something out there? So when he said they changed it, there's a chemical change that's occurred here. It's not the way it should look in a 10 feet in front of you. That's the way the photography was back then. Coleman Bonkovitsky saw that, and he pointed it out that he could see star patterns in the sky. Totally impossible with these little brownie Instamatics. So Tim was a great friend. We called each other, I called him like a big brother. And we would talk on the phone a lot. I wasn't doing any writing for him, but he did ask me to do some at the last books he had. But he was great. He was wonderful. And we
One of
loved
a
him.
kind.
We loved him very much
One of a kind.
and miss him a lot because we used to just goof around.
And
He would
you've
come over
seen,
and party and dance here with us.
you've seen Tim after he passed on, you had shared on a couple of the shows.
Yes, and one time I was out parking the car. I had to double park the car, and my doorman and a few people were standing around talking. And I telepathically heard from the crew. They say, "Look up." So I look up. It's around 9:45 in the morning, and there in the sky comes a ball of light, white ball, sits above us. And I pointed to my friends who were standing around. I said, "See that?" And they go, "Oh yeah, what is that? A balloon?" I said, "No, it just showed up and came in." I said, "It's a spaceship." Well, who was in it? It was Tim. He had the crew and friends of Ashtar's friends. There's crews, not my crew, but Ashtar's crews, who are friends of mine too. That it was Tim. He was taking a ride with them and they were showing him things. So he's now doing a lot of different things, working with on the frequencies of the Ashtar command people. He's back and forth to Earth, to his mom and visiting his family. And he has an apartment in a place that looks like New York City, futuristic, which I've been to.
We will devote a show to that story.
He's great. He's
Very
doing
much, Marc, and it seems that Tim was very well loved and he was very generous with his time, with his ideas, with his connections and so forth. And that's pretty much universally stated. So thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Last but not least, Carole Linda Gonzales.
Hi.
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 And I'm surprised I didn't get to know Carole earlier. We moved in some of the same circles throughout the years, but I'm glad that we connected now, and she's been a great asset to our programs, sharing her thoughts and her experience. What are your experiences with Tim?
Well, unlike others here, I didn't actually work with Tim. I was a fan. That's what I was,
Okay.
a fan. I would say that I met him 2 times. I had a UFO sighting years ago and was looking for more information on the topic. Wanted to meet others who knew about it. I didn't know where to go. And then I saw an ad. I saw an ad for a UFO conference. Tim used to do lots of UFO conferences, even here in New York. And I went to one. This was at the Hotel Commodore. I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago. My memory of that conference was really only one thing. I think Jim Moseley was there, so I heard him speak. But I remember a 6-foot tall alien made out of Reynolds wrap. that sparkled in the light. And it worked. It just worked. I mean, I was a teenager, so what did I know? I thought it was great. So after that, I went on Tim's list and I went to practically everything that he did. Um, I remember attending events here in New York and other cities. Guests were John Mack, Bud Hopkins, other legendary people. John, famous Mothman guy,
John Keel.
also. Right, John Keel was at them. I met all these
I
people
remember
through
him.
Tim. Yeah. Also, one of my favorite people was the nightclub witch, Wally Emlark. So I went to some of her meetings at her home. She had a circle that she cast at the door. We entered in. She was tall, beautiful. I thought she was beautiful, mysterious. You know, one of those witches with a lot of makeup and tingly jewelry, just my type of thing. When you're 17, you know, you think that's great. So I remember that, and I enjoyed that very much. I met Carole and Rodriguez at many of those early meetings, and Antonio Huneas, who I wish you would look up and find, because he would have a lot to say for you if you could
I
get
remember
in touch with
Antonio.
him.
He used to be a regular John Keel's Fortean Society years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how and Wally, she was amazing. She had worked with David Bowie and other celebrities of the day. There was also a meeting with the foundation. I think that was a spinoff of the process, if you know what the process was. I mean, Tim really knew everybody. Then I lost touch with him for many years. I forgot I had had a UFO sighting. I forgot about it. I forgot about Tim. I forgot about all you guys. I don't remember anything. Then suddenly, boom, the sighting came back to me. And I said, oh my God, I remember. And Tim came back into my consciousness. So I looked him up on Facebook. We chatted. He updated me on what happened with many of the people that I had once known. There was this very loud Hungarian military guy. I don't know if Marc might have remembered him. And there was he had so many interesting people. So he updated me on what happened and told me that Wally had died, which was very sad. And after that, we just talked all the time. Anytime I had a question, Tim was there. He knew everything. He just knew everybody, everything that was going on. He updated me and reminded me of the things I had forgotten about. And then one day, Nick Curto of New York Disclosure, who I'd gotten in touch with, I did a talk with Marc on Ingo Swann. And somehow Tim heard it. And after that, he invited me to participate in a few of his projects. And that was my experience with Tim. All good, all wonderful.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you. Again, Tim is somebody who touched a lot of lives in a very positive way, and entertained and educated a lot of people on topics they might not normally know about. Because of the time constraints we have, I won't share my experiences right now. I've shared them before, though. But I will ask everybody, how can we best honor Tim's memory and his legacy? I personally, I'm doing these shows once a year. I'm going to try to aim for 3 of them. We're going to focus on some of the books that his family now is disseminating to the world, and include them in reviews and author interviews and things like that. Can you think of any way that we can honor his legacy more, or anything else we could do? And we'll start with Tim again.
Well, doing shows like this is a great way, to keep his memory alive. Unfortunately, with so much stuff like this, once a person passes away, a lot of times they tend to be forgotten. I mean, already I have people ask me, say, like, who Brad Steiger was, or even who
Oh, wow.
John Keel, yeah, or even who John Keel was. And it's sad, but unfortunately it's what happens. And so you know, I want to try to keep, Beckley's name alive as best as I can. I think one of the ways that I've been working on it is by continuing his ideals on book publishing and trying to publish books um, like Tim would have published them. And I mean, he taught me a lot about book publishing, and we've been trying to keep that flavor alive with Zontar Press and the books that we've been putting out. And each of our books so far that we have published with Zontar Press, we always acknowledge Tim Beckley right in the right in the very
Yes.
front. Because face it, if it wasn't for Tim Beckley, all of us would not know each other, and we wouldn't be doing the things that we're doing today. Uh, so Beckley taught us all so much, and so I just encourage everyone, if you don't know anything about Beckley, then look him up, and read his books. That's the best way right now I can say to keep his memory alive.
Thank you, and I will continue contributing to your books since you're continuing the legacy and since you're an awesome individual on your own merits. So we'll support those efforts that you are making. How can people get in contact with you, Tim?
Sure. Well, right now the best way is to our most recent book is called A Weird Time, Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space. And, Hercules, you've got a great chapter in this book. But we've got a website for this book called weirdtimebook.com. And on this site, we've got a place where anybody can send an email to the authors. They basically, they'll come to me, and then I'll disseminate them, to everybody's a proper email. But that's really the easiest way. Just go to weirdtimebook.com and just find the page called About the Authors. And that way you can communicate with anybody associated with the book.
Thank you, and we will be doing a special on the book in the very, very near future before the year is up. So thank you very much. Olav,
Thank you.
how can we honor Tim Beckley's memory and your contact information as well?
I think a lot of what Tim said is true. I think in my case, the way that I try to honor him is to keep him in my heart and to remember the conversations that I had and the help that he provided me. I am eternally grateful for that. And, when I go to publish a book and I use probably a very similar method of discernment that Tim uses, since we were both trained by the same guy. I think he was trained much better than I was. So. But Tim was kind enough to help me, and so I'm always thinking about that when I'm publishing a book and I'm trying to decide, what I want to write, or I'm trying to pass it through that filter, but at the same time remembering where that filter came from. But I think the best thing that any of us can do is to keep him in our heart and to do shows like this where we talk about him, whether it's once a year or 5 times a year, whatever it is, to come together and to remember this amazing man who helped all of us. Because the one common thread amongst all the people on this call right now is that he helped us, and he was kind to us, and he was there for us in one way or another, and he involved us and promoted us and supported us. And I think keeping him in our hearts and remembering what he did keeps him alive. So I think that's probably the best thing to do, is that each person he touched is to make sure that you remember who he is. The minute you sent me this message, I think I emailed you back about 3 minutes later and said,
Yes, you did.
yeah, I'm in, because I want to honor him. And this is just one way, but I honor him in my heart all the time. As far as how to get a hold of me, I sell books on Amazon. You can search me on there. Captain Tiki Show. We have a podcast called the Enigma Hour. On Instagram, it's Captain Tiki Show. And on Facebook, it's so if folks, add me, message me, I'll respond. I respond to everybody, whether you're a bot or not. And I just wait for you to be a bot. So I'm pretty easy to find.
And I'm honored that you're here. You're always welcome on the shows, and I'm glad your busy schedule allowed you to be here today.
I made time.
Thank you. And Tim, you have a podcast also. You want to tell us about the podcast?
Yeah, let me unmute my mic here. You could hear me along with Gene Steinberg on the Paracast, and its website is theparacast.com. That's very easy, and it can be heard on I think practically every streaming platform that there is out there. But that again, that's the Paracast with Gene Steinberg.
And people have heard me the times I was on the Paracast, more so than any other show I've been on, including my own. I was walking through the town and, oh, I heard you on Paracast. I heard you on Paracast. So it's a very popular show. Thank you. Marc and Phyllis. And Phyllis, you're going to grace us with a glimpse of you.
I usually get my hand in there.
There you go.
We have a great idea, which maybe Tim Swartz might enjoy.
Tim,
Okay.
Tim, why don't you write a book and do personal reflections and ask all of us that actually knew him and worked with him, especially in the glory days, and say personal reflections of Tim Beckley, Mr. UFO, by the people who knew him. And I'm sure everybody on this panel would love
we'd
to
love
contribute.
yeah, personal reflections and experiences, something like that. Mr. UFO.
You could do it.
Yep.
You're the man.
You are.
Yep, that's a great idea. That's
Just be sure to include us.
Yeah.
oh, definitely. Well, it's your idea, so how could I not? That would be pretty crappy of me.
I think it would be a terrific book.
I would buy it
I
myself.
would love
It's
it.
fine, 10 times. Okay, so
Yep.
it's fun. We're just talking about it while we're going, wait a minute. We both exactly had the same idea at the same time. And it was like, whoa, that's when it comes through with tell Tim this. So
Uh-huh.
currently
That's
we're going like
yeah.
personal reflections of Mr. UFO, Tim Beckley, and the people who knew him or something like that, or friends of people, things like that.
Maybe we could
That's
make it go viral. We just need some young people who have a big following to get behind, marketing these types of things. He could become, what's the word when you're retro but you're cool?
An icon, iconic. Or
Yes, yes.
that sounds awesome. If you
It
guys
does.
do that,
Yeah.
count me on board. I would definitely write
Oh,
or
and-
contribute towards that.
Just forgetting a vibe here, guys, but I have a feeling Tim's behind this thing all the way. You know him. He's like, yeah, in his green suit and hat. Yeah, we know.
Yep.
And sadly, our friends, like Carole mentioned, are passed on. John Keel, of course, and Jim Mosley, we knew him too.
Ingle Swan.
Ingo Swan, of course, he's on the other side in 2013. But I don't think Tim knew Ingo,
No,
as far as I know, no. But
But this would be a great book. I think people would enjoy it.
it'd be great. And I'd be a bestseller.
Maybe George Norrie would like to promote it.
Maybe, who knows? I don't know. But you can get in touch with us on our email.
Oh, you could even get George Norrie to contribute.
I don't know if he
Because-
knew him. He probably did.
No,
He
used to
was
be
on a show,
used to
right?
be on Coast to Coast.
Right. I'm sorry, guys. That's how I got on Coast to Coast, because of Tim.
Awesome.
Tim, right. So you can reach us at Marc, M-A-R-C, Brinkerhoff, B-R-I-N-K-E-R-H-O-F-F at yahoo.com. And
Facebook.
Facebook is my name again, Marc Brinkerhoff. YouTube's what
Marc
else we got?
Brinkerhoff.
And our site,
Instagram, but
marcbrinkerhoff.com.
we don't do much on Instagram. I always forget. And plus the websites are intergalacticmission.com, etuniversalzone.com, marcbrinkerhoff.com.
That's about it. I can't. And we're still working on our books, and we're still
Yeah,
finishing the
so
first
don't
one.
ask us to write it. We'll write a
Yeah,
piece,
because
though.
Phyllis has a story too with Tim before I met her. the day you met him.
Yeah, no,
And-
you know, but we don't
And
have
she worked
time
in
for that.
radio and all that.
We don't have time for that.
This will continue, I'm sure. I'm sure there are a lot of stories that haven't been told. We'll be doing this yearly, and so we'll share it then on another show, focused on the new book that's coming out about Tim, it seems. So we'll share the stories then.
It'll be
And,
fun, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. And Marc has a monthly show with Phyllis, the ET Universal Zone, and that's on Blog Talk Radio on my channel.
First
And
Friday of a month.
first Friday of the month, and he's also a frequent guest on many of our panel discussions. So
Oh, yeah.
you can find him here as well. Thank you very much,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Hercules, and everybody.
And thank you, everybody.
And Carole, how can people reach you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I don't do anything special right now. I'm more in the world of a mundane world of workday world, but I like to talk about all sorts of topics. And I'd like to echo what others have said here already. Continue to do these types of talks that you're doing, Hercules, on Tim's work. Perhaps a UFO documentary on his life. I remember once I suggested to Tim, why don't you write a book? Duh, like he hasn't written many books. That was his response. I meant a serious book about his life and how he came about to do the things he did. I mean, he was a man of many facets. He was like a gem. He was talking on UFO subjects when no one else was in New York City. I remember I was on a podcast with him and we talked about New York City back in the day. I remember Flying Saucer News. I used to walk by that office all the time. I didn't know what it was about, but Tim knew because he worked there at one time. Tim just knew everything. So there you have it. I'm on Facebook, Carole Gonzales. You're welcome to friend me and talk about what we're talking about here.
Thank you, and we're lucky to have Carole joining our podcast whenever her busy schedule allows. So thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody. And Tim, we had there's a book to write and a documentary to make. So
Absolutely.
quite a while. This will be posted by tomorrow. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of the schedule to be here. I have a minute. I'll quickly share my story. I never really knew Tim Beckley well. I met him during the John Keel days of yesteryear when Antonio Huneos and Stanton Friedman and all those guys were gathering together in New York and afterwards going out to eat. And I was in there as often as I could get to it. I contacted Tim again when he was making movies, so I reviewed a bunch of his movies. I remember a vampire movie, especially that when the review wound up on Amazon. We kept in touch. When I started podcasting, I interviewed him on the podcast a couple of times. Then I continued writing reviews for his books. Then I started writing for him. I wanted to meet Tim Beckley as a kid because he used to publish hard-to-find occult books. And I was heavily into the occult. And I remember having to spend hundreds of dollars and wait many months to get books through like Weiser's or through antiquarian booksellers. And Tim was publishing them for a few bucks. So, you know, I thought very highly of him. I remember when in high school, my parents wanted me to come with them to visit a relative. And even though I liked my relatives, I really wasn't in the mood to go visit with my parents. But they said that these relatives lived in New Brunswick, New Jersey. So I said yes, because I figured Tim Beckley is in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I looked for him. His family told me that I came within a couple of blocks where he actually lived in my wanderings around looking for him. But I always wanted to be one of the people who wrote for Tim's books with the lurid covers and the spectacular titles. And I'm glad that that came about. And I've Tim Beckley to thank for that, for getting me inexpensive occult books and for inspiring me and helping to shape my life in a very significant way. Thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.